What's happening in the canine industry? For all the latest news, views, and expert opinions, stay right here for the Canine Paradigm. You'll hear from industry leaders, experts, doyens of the industry, learned colleagues, movers and shakers, and the odd randy guest. Get the latest insights and expert advice from both here and abroad from the people in the know. Now, here are your hosts, Glenn Cook and Pat Stewart. And I'm Lofty Fulton, and I'm out of here.
Glenda?
Yes.
We have to do a new ad.
We do.
It's a solemn time. Our long-time sponsor of the show, George Kittredge,
Yes.
very, very sadly passed away. And we formerly used to advertise for him his Rowdy Hound boxes.
We did.
So we don't actually know what's happened with Rowdy Hound boxes. You know anything about that?
I looked at the website. It said that they're recalibrating since their founder and boss has passed. But nonetheless, I think that you and I want to honour the memory of George Kittredge anyway. He was a friend to both of us, a hell of a good guy, and he supported us almost immediately. He was on board through and through, and I just don't want any of us to forget George. He was a terrific human being.
So we intend to continue to advertise Rowdy Hound, even though we don't know what's going on with them.
Yep.
In the hopes that they keep going, and that can be a bit of George's legacy that we're able to continue to promote.
I hope so.
In checking it out, we had a look to see, because we're not real good with the sponsorship. So we had a look to see who's actually paying for sponsorship. And we have a list of people to tell you that we support. And the first is our sugar mama, Barbara de Groot.
She's been with us from the start as well. Barbara's been an absolute staple in our...
She's a gem.
She is a gem.
She has a business.
She does. From the Heart Dog Training.
From the Heart Dog Training.
Yep.
You can check it out. But she supports us as much and more than anybody ever has. So we appreciate you very much, Barbara. Another person who's supported us from the start.
The Einzelwiener.
Einzelwiener.
The Bullfed.
The Bullfed.
Yep.
It's where I get all my stuff.
Yeah.
It is, truly. It's where I get all my dog gear. If I need something, Jason's my first point of call. I don't use his shit website. He has a website. It's dog shit. I just message him directly. You guys probably should use his shit website, but I don't.
Yeah, because you don't want to message him directly and get his grumpy ire of the day.
Yeah, but do it. Get all your dog stuff from Jason. He's got everything you need. He's got all the shit that you need to train a dog for realty.
Everybody who comes to seminars and looks at mills and asks me mills questions, ask Jason.
Yeah.
Jason can point you in the right direction for getting the mill that's best suited for you.
I really like his leashes. I'm a big fan of his leash pack. That's why I sort of convinced him to do it. But anyway, get your stuff from Einzelwiener.
Yep.
Do you know who has a fantastic website and ships internationally?
My wife?
Your wife,
Yeah.
Canine Paradigm.
I couldn't imagine her not having a good website, how much of a perfectionist she is.
Well, the products are amazing. My dog merely being alive is a walking testimonial to that. My dog, who I've retired numerous times and has come out of retirement when I've managed to get his body back to healthy. And a big part of that is related to Canine Paradigm. So check it out, everybody.
I could say so many nice and biased things about Canine Paradigm and my wife, but what I will say is ignore me. Just look at testimonials. The testimonials speak for themselves. That's where the field trials are working. What makes Narelle's day, and mine as well, is when people are emailing in and sending messages of, well, primarily people have had no hope in the past because just everything that they were trying wasn't working, and now it is. And that is the testament that something is actually really working. And the other thing which I will add, one of the things that Narelle's told me in the past is dogs are incapable of understanding the placebo effect.
Oh, that's a good point.
So you can fake it on a human, but you can't fake it on a dog.
I never thought about that before. That's actually a really good point.
Well, my wife's actually a very smart person.
There you go.
So she's told me that humans are subject to the placebo effect where dogs are not. So it either works or it doesn't on dogs.
There you go. That makes total sense.
Yep.
There's one other person who puts a fair amount of work into this show.
Yeah.
It's me.
Yeah. Funny about that.
And I have a digital product that you can buy. If you go to my website, seriousdogbusiness.com, right now I've got 2 courses available to you. The Overview, which is a small course where you could learn how I teach.
Yep.
But the other one is the Wave Tops, which is a bigger course. It's everything I know about dog training. Well, it's not everything. It's a lot of what I know about dog training.
Yeah,
Check it
terrific.
out.
Yeah.
$500 dues. That's all it's going to cost you.
I recommend it when people are saying, what do I do? How do I get in the industry? I recommend them to your course.
Oh, wonderful. Thanks,
Yeah.
sir. All right, on with the show. Welcome back to the Canine Paradigm. I'm your host, Pat Stewart. I'm joined in studio today by my co-host, Glenn Cook.
Hello, sir. Hello, everyone.
Are we going to pretend that it's not the same date? We are kind of batch recording. No big deal.
Yes.
So we're working through a bunch of these cool topics that people gave us. And the next one, we're going to do 2 questions at once. I'm going to read you both of them because they're very similar.
Right. Okay. Yep.
So Jessica Sutter says, do you think the modern expectations that most pet people have for their dogs are reasonable? And do you think on average, pet dogs are better off now than they were 30 years ago?
Is that 2 different questions from the same?
That's Jessica. Well, it is 2 questions. But then the next one is from Curable Johannes, and he says, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the seemingly inverse relationship between the quality of dogs and the quality of dog training in the world. As training improves, the average dog weakens. How can we change this and make them both improve? Or do you think it's not an inverse relationship? So as is our nature, we tend not to actually answer anyone's questions directly. We just use them as sort of stepping off points for conversation. And I think those 2 kind of step us off towards the same conversation. So Jessica's saying, do you think modern expectations that most people have for their dogs is reasonable? Do you think dogs are better off now than they were 30 years ago? And Kiribul says, do you think there's an inverse relationship between the quality of dogs and the quality of training, and that we've gotten better at training and maybe the dogs don't need to be as good?
All right. So I have thoughts on the first one almost immediately. That was Jess's question, right?
Yeah, Jessica Sutter.
Okay. So with Jessica's question, as far as science goes, dogs are in a better off situation. As far as health and nutrition goes, the potential is there for them, but they're still being funneled into a very unhealthy market. It was interesting. I saw something online the other day because I just want to talk about the health and nutrition side of things for a minute. I saw something online the other day that said, I used to eat all these things when I was a kid and I never had any ill effect. And they were showing certain products like ice creams and biscuits and so forth. And then they showed the ingredient panel of ice cream back in like the 70s and 80s compared to what it is now with the chemically bombarded with all artificial sweeteners and a whole range of things. The same exists for how dogs were rurally fed and how they were looked after. I'm married to one of the most amazing canine nutritionalists in the world, somebody who researches literally every day, and she just scares the shit out of me with things that she shows me, like people inadequately feeding their dogs. There's a movement of people who are getting better with those sort of things. So the movement is there, but there's still the vast majority of people are very badly feeding their dogs, terribly feeding their dogs. Like the nutrition panel that dogs are getting is just woeful. Even though it's been red flagged and proven and people have whistleblown on it and shown people, they're still continuing to do it because they're marketed that way. So it just goes to show how exceptionally well marketing works and how dangerous it actually is, because dogs are not in a good nutritional space as compared to when I grew up and, you know, when I was a young guy. And dogs were eating a lot less processed foods. They were eating more table scraps. You know, they were eating steamed vegetables and meats that people were eating. But these days, it's more problematic material.
Yeah. Okay.
So in that aspect, things have gotten definitely worse. And there are people like Narelle and other people who are showing people, hey, with some effort and some consistency, you can turn this around. Like you can immediately take charge of this and change this into the other angle. What I will say, disappointingly, is working dog people are some of the worst culprits. They're the most convenient feeders on the market that still literally pour processed food into the dog's bowl and have high expectations and enormous demands of their dog's working capability.
What makes you say that though? Like, who are you encountering?
Most people I'm talking to.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, most people I'm talking to, because I'm literally asking everybody these days as a internal survey of my own, as a conversation starter, hey, what are you feeding your dogs?
Yeah, right.
To be honest, I'll be transparent. I've got a dog in the race now. Like I'm a co-owner in a nutrition company. I've got a vested interest in that, but it's not out of malice.
Okay.
It's not out of malice the reason that I'm asking those questions. It's out of pure interest to find out, what are you doing for your dogs? How do you prepare your dogs, you know, holistically, mind, body and soul? How are you preparing your dogs for trial? Mate, incredibly, some people that I've known for years are still feeding the dogs some of the worst, shittiest diets that you could possibly think of. Look, it could be a budgetary thing, so I'm not going to hammer home on people, but they can still do better. There's people who feed some really crappy dog foods who could be using good meal toppers, and even they could be adding scraps of vegetables that they're eating, you know, like when they're steaming veggies or preparing them and stuff like that. They could be putting it in their dog's food to make it all the much better. I'm genuinely interested on that topic. I'm very, very interested on that topic because I know that when I see blood panel work done from dogs and so forth, it can be improved dramatically, and there is exponential knowledge around it now. Like, there was no science about that. You go back, let's say 15 years ago, no one gave a fuck. It was basically just like, do your worst. Throw the most toxic lumps of coal into a bag and sprinkle some sauce on top of it and go at it, go forth and prosper, make as much money as you can on the misery of fucking dogs' health. These days we know a lot more about those sort of things. So I'm going to leap off that topic now because I don't want to oversaturate the conversation about it. But that is one of the areas that I definitely think is a problem. The other area that I think is a problem, we've got people who are social media entities, the traditional influencers who aren't dog trainers. They're people who are passionate about dogs, but they're much more passionate about their bank account, and they're advising people on a lifestyle of owning, working with and training and rehabilitating a dog. And these people have got 2 seconds of actual physical dog knowledge. And that is incredibly on the rise. So when I was involved in dog training, when I was a younger guy, if you wanted to learn how to train a dog, you actually went down and went to a park and trained a dog with people. Like, you found people who were involved in physical training. And it's not to say they were the best dog trainers in the world either, because I've certainly encountered people where I thought, oh, this is a bit of a shit show down here as well. The way that people cohabitate with each other and the way that they stand over people is actually terrible. There are old dog bodies, very old world dog bodies in Australia back then that were just terrible dog trainers because it was volunteers of people who would come together and develop egos in their own little echo chamber. But then again, there were groups of people who were absolutely amazing. They were very curious about developing their skill set. They were very thoughtful about the type of dogs that they were working with and the skill set that they were producing on the other side of that. Mate, you've done courses before called Pros and Cons. One of the seminars that you were running for a while, it made me think about just the title of that alone made me think about all the pros and cons that have carried through life. Regardless of this topic that Jessica brought up, it's something that I constantly do a little bit of like an audit on all the time and think, how were things now compared to back then? There are some things that are so much better and there are some things that incredibly are so much worse. What I have literally seen with my eyes, which is worse, is the control that people have over their dogs in public spaces. Now, you would think with the skill set, the knowledge, the science, the nutrition panels, all of those things that you would think that with the internet and the incredible speed, and especially now that how fast AI will spit things out at your fingertips, how blessed we are to have immediate access to information, that dogs would be in a much better place. And yet they're still being influenced by shithill influencers who are giving people the most bogus advice I've ever seen in my life. That sort of situation really troubles me, and it makes me think, how did we go so wrong?
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think it's kind of hard to get a measure on. Like you said, there's a lot of different, specifically to Jessica's question, do you think on average pet dogs are better off now than they were 30 years ago?
The potential for it, yes.
Yeah, I think probably they are. I wouldn't know how to measure that. Like anecdotally from what we see, the problem for us as dog trainers is that we have such a negativity bias because we see the problems, right? Because people who are living their best life, doing a great job with their dog, we don't interact with them because we have no reason to.
Yeah,
right?
That's a good point.
And so like I really try, it's like with the cavoodle problem, right? Like we and you have been crucified by people online because we support people getting cavoodles. But yeah, as a dog trainer,
that seems to be a cultural thing too. It doesn't seem to be as big a problem in Australia as it is the US.
Yeah, well, so I did the research on this a while ago. I can't remember all the details, but the cavoodle bloodlines in Australia are pretty deep, right? So like they're, 20 generations in. So they're a pretty well-established breed.
Yes.
And as I've pointed out in the past, like the only selective pressure of a cavoodle, because nobody cares that the color is exactly right, that the size is exactly right. Like people, does this make a good pet? That's what gets it returned to the breeder if it's not a good pet.
Yep.
So that's the selective pressure. But we have a strong negativity bias because yes, I've seen some very fucked up cavoodles, right? Like I've seen some. But when I look at the percentage of cavoodles that I've seen in my life, like as a professional, I've only seen fucked up cavoodles, right? But in my life, when I think about my friends and family and people that I just see around the area with cavoodles, the percentage of cavoodles that I see that are fucked up is minuscule because I see tons of cavoodles and they're really great dogs.
Yep.
So I think for us as dog trainers, we can often look at a situation and we only see the problem situations. And I think that, you know, you're one of them, but there isn't many people who've been at this for 30 years doing in-home, like seeing how people are living with their dogs for 30 plus years. There's not many people like that. Dog training is a pretty high turnover industry, right? Like most people, certainly there are plenty of people who have been at it for a very long time, but most people sort of come and go in that 5-year sort of turnaround. Like, you know, we see waves of them. Even since we've been doing the show, you see waves of people coming and going. People get really into it. They take it on as the jobby. They do that for a little while. And then, you know, either their real life gets too busy or whatever, they just kind of fade away from it. And that's totally normal. And I think a lot of the people who are sort of consider themselves in the industry, the reason they are is because they've got their own cool dog that they're on their journey with.
Yep.
They're peripherally involved with other dogs, but then as their dog ages out, they just kind of fade away and sort of disappear, right? So that seems to be pretty common. It's a pretty high turnover industry. So,
or they have children and their life changes.
Exactly, right? There's so many reasons that are quite natural that people would cycle through. 30 years ago, I was busy being 11 years old, all right? So like I don't know what the fuck was happening with dogs in people's homes beyond my own dog in my own home. And what I know is that when I was 11 years old, we had a border collie, her name was Sasha, and she had a fucking awesome life, right? I can't remember what we used to feed our dogs. Dogs always got the leftovers at home, right? So I'm from a big family. I'm number 4 of 5 kids, right? So 7 of us in the house. That's a decent amount of leftovers of food, you know, so the dog ate that, but I can't remember what was her main food. I don't know. I was too young. But that dog had an awesome fucking life. That dog lived great. My dad is naturally good with dogs. He's not a dog trainer, but he knows how a dog should be treated, right? Dogs were treated well. My mum is very loving, caring. It was great. The dog was perfect. And so that's the only insight that I have. But similarly, that's all I see in my personal life as well. Like I only see people in my personal life who have like live with their dog well and do well with their dog. I can't really give a solid answer on, do I think on average pets were better off 30 years ago or now? I don't know. But what I know I see now is in the short time that I've been in the real dog world, you know, like, so I've only been out of the army 9 years. In that time, I've seen people get harder and harder to be convinced to treat their dog like a dog.
Yes,
I think
that's a very good observation, and that was probably the point that I missed on saying. I think that's the key point to this entire discussion.
Yeah, and so while I think it's fantastic that we see an increase around the concern for a dog's welfare, right? Like that's great. I'm happy that people realize that a dog is a living, breathing, sentient, feeling, thinking thing, and they want to create the most positive experiences for that dog. I think that what I have noticed in the short time that I've been in dogs is that people are more interested in the individual moments for the dog all being wonderful rather than looking at the bigger picture of the life of the dog and thinking, does this dog have a good life? And I think sometimes when you can't see the forest for the trees, it's very easy to get stuck, you know, rather mistreating a dog because you're worried about every individual moment that the dog is having rather than looking at the bigger picture of its life and being like, how do I create a wonderful life for this dog so that on its deathbed, when it reflects, it goes, fuck yeah, this was a good run, rather than like, I lived under constant stress of trying to be satiated all the time. And I think that I remember seeing this, you know, The Block. Remember the TV show, The
Yes,
Block?
I do.
I think that still runs. So
Yeah, it does.
I haven't watched it in forever, but I think the guy's name's Scotty Cam, who
he was a builder and
so
turned TV
for
personality.
non-Australians who wouldn't know, there's a show, The Block, it's probably around the world, where they get people, it's a renovation show, contestants move into these homes, they renovate them and then they sell them, and whoever gets sold for the most
It's like
wins.
apartments that they're all connected to each other.
Yeah. So that's been running for ages. And the guy who's like the host of it and is the licensed builder of the show, although I don't think he is that anymore, this guy, Scotty Camp. So he was a builder in Australia and then somehow ended up in TV and all that. And he had a dog when the show started. I think the dog's name was Suey or something like that. And it was just this wonderful dog, right? Like it was always with him on the building sites and was never
Blue
any
heeler type of dog, wasn't it?
cattle dog sort of thing, right? And it was like most people at the time would, like when I was an apprentice 20-something years ago, it was pretty common that there were dogs on building sites. And it was the same. Like the dogs always hung around at the back of people's utes. There were regularly dogs on utes protecting the tools and stuff like that. And they were typically pretty social dogs. But if you try to take their tools, you were getting bitten. I remember seeing a guy get bitten pretty badly by a little Kelpie that was at the lunch break really friendly with everybody, and was a nice social dog. But then when it was working time, he was sitting on the back of the ute. And if you walked past the back of the ute, someone tried to pat him because they were just patting him at the lunch break and got nailed by him because the dog's job was to protect everything on the ute. And like the moment your hand goes into that space, you're getting bitten. And I remember at the time, everyone saying to the guy like, why'd you fucking do that? You deserve to be bitten. There was zero sympathy and there was no blame the dog.
Yeah.
There was why did you put your hand into the back of that ute with that dog on it? Like that was a stupid thing to do. And you deserve the bite. You won't do that again. You have been punished, right? The dog has aversively stemmed away that behavior from you. But I remember that dog of Scotty Cam's died and there was an interview I saw with him and he'd gotten a new dog. The dog was missing for a season or whatever and he got a new dog. And there was an interview, it was like a radio show thing, and someone asked him about the way that he treats the new dog. He said, well, the thing is, you just got to be really hard on him for like 18 months, right? You just have to be really strict and control them and really come down on them for 18 months. And then you've got the next 15 years of fucking awesome dog.
Yep.
So that's the plan with this dog. But that caused a whole thing. I can't remember all the details, but he stopped taking that dog places because people were happy with the way that he had the old dog, right? They loved the product that he produced. And he's not a dog guy. He's just a builder that takes his dog places and he's an old world dude. He knows how to fucking have a dog.
Yep.
Right? Everybody loved what he had, but they didn't love seeing him get it.
Yep.
Right? And I think that's what I think has changed for the most part over the last 30 years.
There's a saying very similar to that is everybody loves a steak. They just don't like how it's produced.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what I think has changed in the time that I've been in dogs for the last, 10 years or so, that it's harder to convince people to look at the bigger picture. And when you're saying, because there's a lot of propaganda that tells them otherwise. And when people, you say like, hey, like this problem that we got, we can get rid of it. And then, but it's going to be a difficult old 10 minutes for your dog, but then it's going to have a wonderful life. People are like, no, well, I'd rather not have that. Can I manage and avoid? And you're like, yeah, you totally can, but that's not going to fix the problem. So your dog's not going to have this is a decision point. This is a go left or go right kind of thing. And you can go left or right, but there's going to be really different outcomes for the remainder of the dog's life, depending on which way you go. One way the dog gets its learning moment and goes, right, got it, and gets to be much freer and learns like, don't do that problem thing and learns to be social and can make good decisions in public. And the other is a life of management and you having to control the dog around those situations and constantly be concerned about it and remove the dog when these situations are, so both are fine, but they're very different outcomes for the dog. And so that's what I think I've observed in the time. Like it's harder to convince people one is better than the other, where you go like, it's fine. The problem dog down the street that fence fights at him, that dog, we don't control that dog, but we can tell our dog is not allowed to fence fight back, right? Or you can go another way for the rest of your life and hopefully that dogs that fence fight don't surround you, right? Because I know people, like I've had clients that have to drive to where they take their dog, even though it's a short way, because there isn't a route they can go anymore where the dog doesn't experience some stress or, becomes a problem along the way. And you're like, yeah, but we can fix that. Like those dogs are behind the fence. Like we can't control those dogs, but we can tell your dog is not allowed to fight back because he's not actually in any danger. The dog's behind a fence.
That's truly a remarkable transformation that you brought up, is that noisy voice from the public perception of people that interfere in the direct lives of other people where it doesn't directly affect them at all. They don't have to live with the problem. They can literally close their laptop or switch their phone off and that's it for them. Where the person with the problem, and let's call it a problem dog, has to live with that dog for the rest of their life. But yet they're so hamstrung over the opinions of people that they've never personally met before and worried about what they'll say next I think that's an incredible transformative thing that happened in my lifetime because I grew up with the internet coming in. It's not like my nieces now who grew up with the internet as part of their life. You know, like social media now to anybody, like it's part of Rip's life. You know, Rip was born into a social media age, even though you've protected him and restricted him from it and been good parents to him because you and Jane are sensible people. There are a lot of nonsensical people who let their children grow up being entertained and raised on the internet and social media, which is why they are confused about what they're seeing and what they're reporting on and how they're interacting with the public.
Yeah.
Because their parents are A, trying to be their best friends and B, raised by the internet. Whereas it's remarkably selfish and stupid, some of the advice that people are given. Because as I said, all they have to do is like pull the lid down on their laptop and that's it for them. Like they go, oh, that's cool. I don't have to deal with that problem until next time I log back on again. Whereas the owner of the dog, it's a 24-hour thing. You know, like 24 hours a day, they have to deal with this sort of situation. And the minute they're thinking, well, I need to do something aversive, but I'm so afraid to let anybody know because the minute they show results on the internet, now that they've been publicly made aware of, they're in the arena now.
Yeah.
You know, they want them thrown to the lions over it because they're saying, well, now I know that you've used aversives on that dog.
Yeah, for sure. Do you think, on average, pet dogs are better off now than they were 30 years ago? My answer to that is I think they absolutely have the capacity to be.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think
like that
some
argument
are.
of potential versus reality.
Yeah. So I think some are and some aren't.
Yes. There are definitely areas where they are and there are areas where they certainly are not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that, I don't want to be misconstrued. Like, I definitely like that people care more now about the welfare of their dog.
100%.
Love that. We've done a pretty good job of educating the public on that you should treat a dog well.
Yeah, of course.
But I don't think we've done a good job of educating the public on what that looks like.
At no time through our journey do I believe that you and I have advocated for poor treatment of dogs.
No. But I don't mean me and you. I mean like in general. I think that
what I'm saying is even though that we have our own strong feelings and big feels about certain things, generally when I feel that we've spoken about any of these sort of situations, I feel that we're speaking from a position of authority where we've actually physically seen the manifestation of different types of behaviours and how it affects people and certainly how it plays an effect on dogs. The one stance that I will always make is if these new trends and suggestions in professional dog training were actually working, then I feel that we would see a considerable reduction in animal rescue and welfare than the current plagues of dogs in animal rescue and welfare.
Yeah.
That's a measurable thing. I don't know anybody who's involved in welfare and rescue at the moment who isn't overwhelmed with a saturation of dogs that nobody seems to want to know about or care about. It's not that they don't care about it. Let me rephrase that. They're dogs that now exist behind the curtain because their problem is seemingly unsolvable. Whereas I always felt that those problems were solvable, but they're just not by today's standards because there's a difference between caring and interfering. And I feel that it's nice that people care. The problem is I feel that has morphed into interfering.
This then sort of feeds us into what Kiribul says here. Love to hear your thoughts on the seemingly inverse relationship between the quality of dogs and the quality of training in the world. As training improves, the average dog's weakens. How can we change this and make them both improve, or do you think it's not an inverse relationship?
Do you have any context on what they feel about the dog weakening?
There's a bit of a conversation that happens afterwards. Doug says, what brings you to believe that the quality of training has an inverse effect on the strength of the dog? And Kiribul says, in the pet world, dogs that would have been euthanized before, overreactive, over anxious, over aggressive, etc., are able to be saved and managed with training today. In the working world, dogs that would have been washed are able to have weakness masked and still trained up to a high level today. As a result, I think, but maybe I'm wrong, the number of genetically weaker dogs is disproportionately higher today than before. This conversation actually goes on quite a bit. There's a few people commenting. Again, I'll choose my words carefully here. I wasn't around for the dogs of the past. And I think sometimes people reflect with rose-colored glasses. And so I think that I don't disagree with what Kiribul's saying, but I'm not convinced that I fully agree either. I think that when you talk to people about their training of the past, they remember it fondly. There's a lot of older working dog people that will talk about what it was like, but also then I see some of those people handling dogs now and I don't value their opinion, right? But the opposite exists as well. There's people who will tell me that, dogs used to be something and how hard it is to find a dog of that caliber. And I watch them train now and I think, oh, they know what they're talking about. They can train. Their opinion is very relevant. They know more than me. They're definitely someone I should listen to. So I see both. And so, again, I don't really know how to allocate that. I think that for sure there have been, with breeds, the Doberman people are going to come after me again. But I think that the Doberman is an interesting example. And I think that the Doberman kind of fits exactly what Kiribal was saying here, that I think that the Doberman is the only dog that was designed to bite people, right? Like it's the only dog that I'm aware of, although maybe there's some modern things like Donovan Pinscher and stuff now. But I think that to my understanding of Louis Doberman, tax collector, designed a dog that could bite people.
Yeah.
And when he was going around to get the money.
Dog that wasn't there to fuck spiders.
Yeah. And I guess a lot of people used to run away or something because he had to make sure that dog was real fast. So it's so much greyhound.
Well, he was beaten up so many times as well.
Yeah. It was the case for sure that the Doberman was a dog that's pure purpose was to be a fuck people up dog.
Yep.
And now, good luck finding one. Not to say they don't exist. They're out there. Doberman people, only a few of you can come at me. The rest of you can go fuck yourselves because your dogs are what I'm saying.
Well, the majority of Dobermans that I've seen now are reflective of German Shorthair pointers. They literally are a black and tan version of a German Shorthaired Pointer. They're soft and gooey and dopey. And whereas I, again, using my length of time that I've been in the industry, I remember several Dobermans that used to come down to our club, which I thought, holy shit, there is no way I want to be clamped by one of these dogs. They're very, very serious and very capable dogs.
And to be clear, I've seen some of those myself recently, right? So they're still around. I'm not saying they don't.
Tim Power's dog, wouldn't you? His Doberman was exceptional.
Yeah, and I've seen some of Paul Hanson's Dobermans that are the real deal for sure, right? And I've seen the odd random one around that I'm like, oh, holy fuck, that's a real serious dog.
They're still there, but they're unicorns compared to what they used to be.
Yeah.
I would never say that the Dobermans were a prolific breed in Australia. Like there wasn't a saturation of amazing Dobermans. In fact, they had this movie on TV called The Amazing Dobermans or something like that. And that was one of the dogs I was first inspired to get when I was younger. I thought when I move out of home and I get my own place, I want to get a Dobe. And one of the Dobes I went and had a look at, I wasn't particularly impressed with it. There was something about the dog I just didn't really like. And it was a Roddy that I found more appealing to that at that point in time.
I think the Doberman, we don't want to keep going down this rabbit hole, but I think that that's an example of there's dogmen of the past that would say getting a real serious Doberman was easy. And now it's very, very difficult. And so that definitely fits the narrative as described by Kiribal here, that dogs have become weaker as training gets better.
Yep.
I think that that's probably an easy thing to say. I'm not convinced that it's 100% legit because I think, as we discussed in the last episode, that people's memories are not what they think they are. I think that people are reflecting on certain experiences and dogs and stuff of the past with rose-colored glasses. I think that, you might have really loved a dog in the past or been impressed by a dog in the past and chosen to remember those things and forgotten about the other things that were not so impressive of the dog. So I think that's a total possibility. And what I think as well is that we're seeing more dogs than we've ever seen before. So it used to be that in order to, pre-social media, in order to know what dogs were like, you had to go see those dogs, right? Or you had to have a real life conversation with somebody who had, right? And this is, even when I started in dogs, it doesn't happen so much now because people are always online, but people used to call each other a lot more. Dog people just used to talk on the phone for long periods of time.
For sure.
Right? Yeah. Even to people you didn't really like or enjoy the company of because you just had to, they were the only people that would talk about your stupid hobby. You know what I mean? Your friends and family didn't want to hear you fucking rattle on about dogs for fucking ages. And so other people did. You know, I can remember when I first started being with Sam at his place and like looking through the pamphlet or the catalog or the trial, whatever it's called, that you'd get at trials with the list of all the dogs that are in there. And that's how you kind of found out about the dogs of the past, pre the internet and the forums and all that kind of stuff. Like you had to have those physical things and know somebody who was at them. So probably it's entirely possible that the ratio of strong dogs to weak dogs was the same. It was only that you didn't know about the weak dogs if you moved in the strong dog circles and you just didn't get eyes on them because they weren't at the same events. They weren't doing the same things. Whereas now you can go looking for that. You can very easily have that served to you in your news feed by accident when you don't want to see it, or you can go looking for it and you can see as many weak dogs as you like, right?
Or when you're watching somebody and they're marking something up and then suddenly it vanishes and there's a new puppy or like a bit of a hiatus and then suddenly there's a new dog with a different name.
Yeah, and we've all seen that. We've seen plenty of that where someone's got a puppy and they're doing all the things and everything's going amazingly and then that puppy disappears.
Yep.
Right? The next layer of his question there, I think is, I do agree with that. I think that training has improved to the point where just because a dog has a title doesn't mean that it's necessarily representative of what that title might have meant 30 years ago, you know? And I think that is probably the case. I think that there's been plenty of times when someone has been asked me about a particular dog and they say it's got a PSA 2 or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, that's impressive for sure. But that tells me more about the handler of the dog than it necessarily does of the dog, right? I think that PSA 2 has a good amount of pressure, but it's still not an insane amount of pressure on a dog. It's the ability to control a dog under that level of stress and duress and desire, temptation, all that cocktail of difficulty that requires a good trainer, someone that knows what they're doing, someone who really understands dogs. So I think that we definitely are at a point where training has gotten to the point where people are able to achieve more from dogs that in the past wouldn't have achieved the same. I think that's a good thing. Like I think that that's good, so long as the people breeding these dogs are able to identify that as well. I don't think that just a dog having a title doesn't necessarily mean that that dog is worthy of being bred. It's definitely a good data point. It's an interesting data point and it's better than not having it. But I think that it's a little bit representative of the quality of the trainer, not so much the quality of the dog.
So what would be your criteria for breeding a dog then after that statement?
Well, I'm very glad you say that because I have never bred a dog. And so I don't have that. Look, I think that I chose pretty early on not to breed my own dog. I had tons of people asking me to early days. And even before his injuries and health issues were apparent, I had said, no, I don't think he should be bred. I think that he's a really good dog. He's incredible. I love him a lot, but he's not perfect, especially when you're talking males. The world is your oyster here, right? Like in the modern world, you can breed from almost any male on the planet with enough money and schmoozing.
Yeah, you can fly in semen and
you can breed from anyone. So I just feel like you shouldn't really compromise anywhere, but you have to physically possess the bitch. You don't have to physically have even met or he even be alive, the male. So I think that we can afford to be more picky and choosy on that. But fortunately, you know, I'm not a breeder. So I have never bred a dog. At the moment, I don't have any intention to. I don't hold any semen. I've never collected in any way like that. It's not something that I do. That's not to say I won't, but in my current situation, I have no plans to.
But have you got any thoughts around it? Have you ever?
Yeah, I think that the dog should be capable of the task that you are expecting. Like mum and dad should be capable of the task that you're expecting the offspring to be capable of.
Yep.
To me, that's step one.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like I think
that's a minimum standard.
Yeah. And so knowing pedigrees and knowing genetics and all that, like that's cool. And I've invested a bit of time into understanding that in my breed. Like in Mallees, I have a reasonably, you know, like I sort of know what's going on generally, but I'm not a nerd for it. I definitely don't have the detail that some people have, but I have like a higher level view of it. And I think more than anything, the greatest indicator of the workability of a puppy is the workability of its parents. And of course, there are genetic anomalies to that. I know of particular dogs that if they're the grandfather, you can count on that dog being awesome. Doesn't matter what the father's like. If that dog's the grandfather, everything's going to work out. Like I'm aware of that kind of shit, but I still think that when you're balancing the level of probabilities, is the parent's ability to do the thing is probably the best indicator of the puppy's ability to do the thing.
Not always.
Totally not always.
Yeah.
But generally.
Generally, yes. I found in contemplating those thoughts, because I mean, up until I've seen the anomalies that come out of puppies and litters before, I've shared that sentiment before where I've thought, if this incredible sire and this incredible dam get together, what amazing puppies they're going to throw.
Yeah.
And
it doesn't work out.
Mate, sometimes it's just a bag of sausages that come out. And you just look at the other end of it and think, how did that happen?
Yeah.
I've seen that in Roddy litters before where there was a dog. I remember there was a breeding that I was so infatuated on getting a puppy, and it was literally money down, because I thought this sire and this dam together. I looked at the back end of their pedigrees and I thought to myself, there's no way that these two dogs shouldn't be able to produce something incredible. Just never happened. Like what came out the other end was just unlike anything that I even imagined, to the point where there was physical abnormalities and just bizarre shit that was going on. Like the personality traits of the dogs were just not replicant of what I thought it would be.
Yeah.
So those sort of things aren't always an indication of absolution in what you're going to get. Now, people might look at that and say, oh, come on, man, like if you're planning things out and you're developing a strategy and you know anything about bloodlines and genetics and so forth, the probability is that outcrossing probably wasn't a good idea.
Yeah.
And that's probably fair to say because there were limitations in my understanding back then of pedigrees. Whereas I've seen the anomaly occur on the other side where you look at a female that's quite weak and a male that's reasonably strong and has produced some of the most impressive dogs I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, for sure.
That's happened in Shepherds and Rotties before where I've just thought, how did that happen? The female would have jumped at a shadow and yet has produced some of the most capable working dogs I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
The difficulty of genetics is hard to predict.
Totally. 100%. And this is why I'm not interested in being a breeder.
Yeah.
This is why I don't want to roll those dice.
Yeah.
But I do stand by my point that titles on a dog is probably representative of a dog team rather than a dog.
Yep.
All right. Like some of the best dogs, if you end up with like a really fucking impressive dog, very high powered, a dog that's a lot, if that dog just happens to end up in the hands of someone who it's their first dog, they might never get titles on it, right? The dog might appear to be an untrained wreck or an untrainable wreck just because of the hands that it was raised by.
Then let me ask you another question based on that. Knowing what you know now and the time that you've been doing your due diligence in the industry, what is your ultimate measure of a dog? How would you ultimately define like the ultimate dog? What is it that sits in Pat Stewart's head to say that's the ultimate measure?
Okay, if I could build my next dog in a lab to describe to you what that dog would look like.
If you're looking at a trial sort of situation where you're thinking that the dog could be 50% of the trainer and 50% of the dog, what would give you the winning vote in your head to say, oh, it's definitely the dog? How would you arrive at that conclusion?
It wouldn't be what I see in the dog, it would be what I see in the handler, in the training. And it would have to be not great training and the dog still be really good.
Okay. So what you're saying is that, if I can summarize, is that despite the handler, the dog still turned out magnificent.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm glad you said that because I remember having that conversation with other dog people many years ago. And this is a conversation that we had 25 years ago when we did have a big group meeting in a paddock and we were talking about the ultimate dog. And I wasn't baiting you to say this. I was just very curious what you have arrived at, because that was what the group arrived at, is that despite the handler's shitty handling, the dog still turned out amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that would be a great dog.
Yeah.
But I think the problem is, in terms of what Kiribel's asking here, is that I believe firmly that every dog has a genetic bandwidth of capability, just like people, right?
Yep.
Like you have a bandwidth of potential.
Yep.
Every organism has this, and Mother Nature rolls that dice. Like she sets that bandwidth.
Yep.
But then where you fall within that bandwidth is going to have entirely to do with your experiences along the way. So that will be your environment, your health, your nutrition, your stress levels, all of that. And the handler is going to be a portion of that. So if you were to look and see, like you might see two dogs walk onto a field at the same time, and one of them's handled by some random new person who's done a 6-week course on dog training and is entering the field, and the other one's entering with Bart, right? and imagine they perform similarly, right? It's reasonable to expect that the dog with the brand new handler is somewhere low in regards to its genetic potential, and the dog that Bart's entering the field with is at the peak of its genetic potential. And if they look similar, at that point, you then have to then go, well, okay, the dog with the random person is probably a better dog. Because if you got them to swap, Bart could lift that dog to a much higher, like closer to the ceiling of its genetic potential. But I think that's an easy thing to say where you've got a brand new person and Bart Bellin. It's not so easy when they're just two people you don't really know the capability of or how they train or anything like that. You see the dog trial. Like if you see a dog go out in the field and trial and it does really well, does really nicely, and the handler handles it fine,
Yep.
you don't really know how they got to that point unless you're involved in that sort of training. You don't even know if they train. You don't know anything about that, right? So I think that it's not a useless data point.
It's something to consider.
But it is just one data point, right? Like how that dog performs in team with the handler. And this is why so many breeders, I mean, I'm not telling you this, but for the audience, this is why so many breeders keep back dogs and kind of do nothing with them. Some of the best breeders, they'll have, some people I know will have dogs that they really haven't done anything much. They might even place the dogs with people who live on property and aren't going to do anything other than give this dog food and let it turn food into shit and let it be a dog. And then we go and check that dog out when it's 3 years old and be like, hey, who did you turn into? Right? Because you were just given freedom. Nobody interfered. You didn't have any bad experiences. You didn't have some trainer that was decided you're going to be their penis extension and fucking put a ton of ridiculous work into you. You just are the raw base. How did you turn out? And that can give you a pretty good insight into what the raw genetics are and that bandwidth of genetic capability. But it's still just an insight. Like it's still not it's not a foregone conclusion as to who the dog is, right? Like, because it still has environmental stresses and factors that are going to contribute to it. But I do think that training has definitely, over the last 30 years or so, people are now able to get dogs through. The average trainer is able to get more from a dog than the average trainer could 30 years ago. I think that, right? Now, whether that's true or not, difficult thing to ascertain. I don't know where you'd get the data on that other than observational data.
Well, I think if you look at totals per capita of what there is now, there's probably a significant increase. There's more clubs, there's more availability, like a lot of the dog sports have spread prolifically around the world. So
yeah, but they're also dying in, like last I heard, it was hard to get an MVBK trial going, right? Like there's so few people doing it. So I don't know, like is there more dog sport? We're aware of it more because of social media.
Yeah, that's probably more
is there actually more happening? So I guess we can kind of round this out. We're now deep into the weeds. But I think to answer sort of both questions, to hit both topics, I kind of don't know. And I think it's a little bit of both from both Jessica and Curable's question on, are dogs better off? I think that they definitely have the capacity to be, and some individuals are and some individuals are not. But to draw a line in the sand and say yes or no, I'm not real sure. And I think I'm going to sit on that same fence again on Curable's question and say, look, I don't know. I think that there's a good amount of evidence in both directions, but I don't know where that lands. And what I know for sure, because there'll be a lot of old and bolds kicking their dashboard saying, no, that definitely were better in the past. I'm like, yeah, but some of you, I believe, and others, I've seen you handle dogs. I don't believe you ever handled dogs the way you tell me you handled dogs 30 years ago, because unless you somehow managed to got worse over 30 years, you're looking back on these things with rose-colored glasses. However, others, I believe entirely. So there's a little from column A and a little from column B.
I've seen what you cheer at, so I'll take your booze.
Exactly, Rick.
Yep.
All right. We've got another question here from Hannah Robinson. This is a fun one. Can you talk about something good / funny / enjoyable you've experienced with training your own dog or a client's dog recently, or a win you've had?
Well, you can go first on that one.
For me, for sure, it was a few months ago closing out level 2 on my own dog.
Yep.
That was a big deal for us. We've done whole episodes and I won't harp on for too long, but when we started trying to get PSA going in Australia, the goal was a 3. I think that my dog was very capable of doing that. Whether I was or not is another question that will remain unanswered with him. But he has the nerve strength, he's got the drive, he's got all the ingredients necessary, and unfortunately had a bunch of injuries, which there's probably bloodline related issues around that. But I had completely given up on the idea of trialing him again. Like I'd sort of given up that. And during COVID, I had sort of essentially retired him. For those of you who have seen the footage of it, like when I went to that first Mondio trial, he was really out of shape. He wasn't in good nick, right? And then that's why after how it went, I was like, okay, well, I'm going to put the work back in and see if I can get you back to like fighting weight to be able to pass this trial. And so I'd kind of given up and I'd sort of thought, he doesn't give a shit. He's happy with his day-to-day life. He's happy with how things go day-to-day. He doesn't give a fuck what titles he has. But I had really wanted to succeed with him. That was a big goal. And so I was stuck between a bit of a rock and a hard place on just achieving things for myself versus building what we were trying to build with PSA. And I made the choice to try and build what we were trying to build and put my own achievements to the side a little bit. That's why we didn't bring out a judge and decoy and stuff for a long time, rather than putting on a big show. Like I could have just paid for it all myself. You know, I've got money. I could have paid for someone to come out, could have put on the show. But instead I wanted to try and build a league, like a functioning league, that there would be other people to show in that level 2 with me. And we did that and he closed it out and we got that leg. And so as much as I would like to have attempted the 3s and stuff, and who knows, like I've called him retired plenty of times. I've brought him out of retirement. And in fact, the problem we face now is that in order to keep running trials in Australia, you have to have a senior decoy. That's me. And now decoys can't show in the same thing. And like I would be needed to be decoying the level 3, not showing the level 3.
Yep.
So I think it's highly unlikely that I will ever hit the field with him again. He's going to redo a PDC at the next trial with one of the members of our club, just for trial experience for them. He's in pretty good shape at the moment, and it's 3 minutes and it's 3 bites. Like he could do that every day. Like he's fine for that.
Yep.
The difference in stress on the mind and body of a dog between a PDC and a level 3 is significant.
Chalk and cheese.
Right? So like I feel very comfortable letting him do a PDC again.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was a big win for me. And it was interesting. I spoke about it when we did it. Afterwards, it was this huge relief. I thought I'd be happier. I'm very happy about it now, but I thought I'd be happier at the time, but I didn't really feel happiness at all, to be honest. I felt relieved more than anything. Now I went back to the back of the car and, we left the field and I went there to have my like moment with my dog, thinking that we were going to have this special bonding moment of having achieved this thing together. And he didn't give a fuck. And I was trying to like I'm like on my knees trying to have this emotional moment with my dog, who just is like, we got a ball or what's going on?
It's
like,
just a Tuesday, motherfucker.
Yeah, like what the fuck? I just did all the things you asked me to do.
Yep.
And we've walked all the way to the car. I think I fucking deserve some payment and I'm not interested. And because Remy's a funny dog like that, he doesn't like any kind of like negative emotions. He doesn't enjoy being around people like that. And so as I'm, elated, but am, like relieved. It was this huge stress relief and I'm like almost in tears. He doesn't want anything to do with me. He's like, fuck off. And he's like avoiding me. So there was that. That's what was a big thing for me recently.
That was a big thing. It was, I think it was a big thing for a lot of us in the club actually, to see that was the first PSA 2 title in Australia. So, it was a big thing, and Remco's been a big part of our life, certainly yours and additionally in mine. I've known him since he was a baby. I think he was here on the second day you got him.
Yeah, something like that.
I've known him since he was like 8 weeks old.
Yeah.
It was great to see, and especially because I know his physical peaks and troughs that have happened over that period of time as well. So all of that combined was quite an amazing Hail Mary.
Here's one maybe that you might like better than the other. This one's from Nicole Joy.
Yeah,
it's similar in a similar vein. People seem to be asking questions in batches here.
Okay.
She says, out of all of the experiences you have had throughout your professional and even personal careers, what stands out to you as the moment which changed your trajectory or gave you that itch to pursue it?
I didn't speak about it so much on here. I did speak about it more on Tom Brown and I had quite an in-depth talk about my time in the security industry and so forth. I think one of the defining moments for me is back when I had Harley when he was still alive, and I was very invested in his training and very invested in training full stop. I always thought to myself, how much of this preparedness actually works? When I sort of twigged in and I realized the dogs love the sleeves and they love the suit so much, like how much of this is really going to carry over into real work? I did want to test myself. I did want to get involved in security and I did want to see if my dog would work the streets. But I also had a measure of discomfort about it because I kept thinking, well, what if this doesn't work? You know, like what if I get myself in a particularly ugly situation? Like I could defend myself. I could fight very well when I was younger, but I kept thinking, what if I get myself in a situation where, you know, like I'm facing down multiple people and I'm
relying on the dog and the dog fails.
That's exactly right. The first time that ever happened, I was at the Station Hotel in Paran. A particularly ugly situation unfolded one night and I was assaulted by one of the biggest guys I've ever seen down there, and Harley fucking hit him like a cannonball launching out of a cannon. I mean, I still have PTSD about that night because it was traumatic. A lot of what unfolded at the time was fucking traumatic. I thought I was prepared for it. I thought I was conditioned to understand what was going to happen, but he hit him like a fucking cannonball. And that man screamed, and when he screamed like a little child. But in essence, it was one of the greatest things I've ever seen in my life. One of the most traumatic, but one of the greatest things I've ever seen because all of the doubts that I had about a dog being trained in personal protection, none of it mattered to that dog. He knew exactly what he was supposed to do. And what I will put in front of that and what I will say about that being the greatest moment for me, one of the greatest moments for me in all of that chaos is if he hadn't have done it, I would have been dead or maimed because the guy came at me with a broken Jack Daniels bottle and he was going to bottle me in the face with it. And I froze because I was not ready for that situation. Now, I've been in street fights before. I've been in some pretty significant one-on-ones before, and I've even been involved in some multiples, but I was not prepared to be bottled in the face. Like that's never been an answer to a problem that I've had to deal with before.
Yeah.
And it caught me so red-handed. Harley saved my life right there and then. There was no two ways about it. He saved my life. He just acted. The more impressive thing about this is for people that hear this conversation might think, oh, there's a lot of brutality floating around this. But Harley was one of the most social dogs you've ever met in your life.
Yeah.
He loved children. He loved everybody. He loved life. He's an incredibly social dog. Never a dog that I would have questioned the mechanisms of control around him because he never showed inadvertent aggression towards anybody for anything unpredictable. And I recall nights at my place where we were drunk and rolling around on the floor and wrestling in the lounge room together, and Harley was in there just having the time of his life. It was the greatest fucking night where we were all getting, hammered and fucking having a great time and singing and dancing. And he wasn't locked outside or thrown outside, and he never took it personally, and he never put himself in a situation where I thought, fuck, this dog's going to bite someone. It's going to turn ugly. Never, ever happened. And yet that night, out of all the things that could have gone wrong, that dog fucking defended my personal fucking being. And I too was like you, where I was just like overwhelmed with gratitude towards him. Like I was just loving on him all the way home. And even the morning when I got up and did a recount on everything and I had to go down and give a statement at the police and everything like that, I even took him down to the police station and I'm hugging him all the way down there. He couldn't give a fuck.
Yeah.
It was just a normal day for him.
Yeah.
But Harley was an exceptionally incredible dog.
That's one of the funny things is how easily dogs can just wash stress, right?
He just didn't give it.
They just have a shake and they're like, yeah, let's carry on. And you're like, no, I'm having a moment here, fucker. Be in this moment with me. Dog's like, no, you're living in the past. Like,
I wanted him
present.
to be overwhelmed with me and share in that moment. And when you were talking about your time with Remco, I thought that was funny that I really wanted it to be far more meaningful to him, but he's just gone, hey, it's another day,
Yeah. Well, that's a testament to the training, right? That he didn't really perceive it as really any different from any other training session.
He just thought it's go time.
Yeah.
This guy is coming on and it's an aggressive moment. It's real and it's time to go. But it was truly an incredible moment for me to actually bear witness to that because after that happened, I had zero doubts anymore. I knew exactly what he would do in any situation. And there had been multiple other encounters after that where he never hesitated. The minute I told him to do it, he just went, yep, and I'm doing it. And he did it with vigor. He really put some people in a hurt locker. which was good because that's what he was supposed to do. And had he not have done that, it would have been, once again, it would have been a serious unfolding situation. But regardless of whether it was simulated in practice or whether it was real, there was no residual with him. There was no spill out. There was no fallout. There was no trust issues with him. Like some people have said to me, oh, once my dog's had a live biting issue, I've lost the predictability in my dog's training. Never did. You know, if I asked him to let go, he'd let go straight away. Where I've seen once something changes from a simulated bite to an actual bite, the dog will go, no, I'm not letting go of this situation now, you know, and they've had to choke the dog out. There were times where he was in the street on people and like he was full deep biting into them. I said out and he just let them go and went, oh, what do you want me to do? And all of the training just made sense to him. I'm looking at him going, fucking hell, you're magnificent. You know, just magnificent. But I didn't have anything to compare it to. I didn't know any better. It was the first time I'd ever produced a dog that was going to do that for me. And I know that I talk Harley up, but I got the evidence. I've got people who were there in the days. Not 2 or 3 people, hundreds of people saw him, hundreds. And they're still alive today that were around when all this was happening. Wasn't the greatest dog on the planet, but he was the greatest dog to me.
Good answer. Well, I reckon that's a place to leave it.
It's a good place to leave it.
That's it for another episode, Canine Paradigm. As always, if you like what you hear, just like, rate, share, subscribe. Do that through whatever subscription service you download us from, and then go do it to another one.
Yes.
If you want to support the show, best way to do that is to jump into Patreon. A few bucks a month gets you a giant backlog of information there, as well as new stuff going forward. And if you want to give more than $3 a month, you could. You could give
$300 a month.
You could give $1 million. Did you know that? People are allowed to give $1 million.
$1 million.
They're allowed to.
We need a Sultan or someone who likes the Canine Paradigm that just says, yes.
Pat, here is the money for your facility.
For your Lamborghini.
No, my facility.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
How many?
Still just hopes and prayers.
Just hopes and prayers?
Yeah. Lots of them, though.
Yeah.
Lots of support.
I know
lots
people
of
have spoken to me
support.
about it, and I've said, well, there's a Patreon account you could just whack it into.
Yeah. Some people have suggested that I start a GoFundMe. I'm definitely not doing that. Like, I'm not going to hit the amount of money I need to get it done unless Daddy Elon suddenly fucking comes across it. But contributions are still very welcome. It doesn't have to go through Patreon. There's no point giving them whatever percentage they take if you're going to give us $30 to $50 million. So if you can get in touch with me directly about that one.
So if somebody just wants to donate a plot of land and...
Yeah, probably money is better.
Yep.
Because like I want it to be in a specific place.
Yep.
Although if you got the land, whatever. Like I'm not going to be picky. Yes, thank you. So you could do that. If you want to get in touch with us, the best way to do that is to jump into the Facebook discussion group. That's where we're drawing all these questions that we're going through at the moment.
Do you know, in saying that, it's so good when I was up in Sunshine Coast and I got to meet a bunch of people that I haven't met before who listen to us avidly and are huge fans of the show. And it was lovely to go out and have a social interaction with them. And
yeah, real life one.
Real life one.
IRL.
IRL.
Yeah.
It was a cool thing to do.
Yeah, IRL is way better than not IRL.
I was listening to a podcast the other day when they were talking about the work from home pandemic. They were just saying, like it's really shown a downturn in culture.
Yeah.
Where companies have now started to insist that people are coming back to work. They're finding that company culture is increasing and productivity is lifting because when people are at home, they're sort of like detached from everybody else.
It's very difficult to develop some sort of like esprit de corps when there is no...
Esprit de corps?
Yeah, esprit de corps. When there is no interactions with the core.
Yes.
All right, so get in the Facebook discussion group or you can shoot us an email. We are info
Did we do spring? Did we do spring?
Oh, you get into spring. Links in the show notes. Get a t-shirt, tapestry, socks, underpants, water bottles. None of those.
Wear a tapestry as a cape.
Yeah, do it.
Yeah.
You shoot us an email. We're info@canineparadigm.com. Love you all. Goodbye.